podcast for those who suffer, which is everyone.
It's a space where we can speak honestly about what it feels like to be in desolate places without losing hope.
Welcome to In the Thicket. Suffering. Welcome to In the Thicket.
All right.
Was that what we were doing? I don't know.
Great. That's great. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our last episode of the season.
Hey, Nicole. How are you today?
Good. I'm good. We always record these in the morning. Well, morning, it's like 11:30, but I still feel like I'm in like that kind of wake up kind of mode, which is good.
Yeah, I had one of those sleeps last night where you feel like you're actively dreaming all night, and so you wake up and you remember all of your dreams, but you feel like you actually didn't sleep. And then the cat has been coming. So my sister's cat that I have, because the two other cats were bullying this one cat, so she has come to live with me, and she has now decided that in the morning when it's time for me to get up, it's time for me to get up. So she'll come in and just stand at the bottom of the bed and be like, wow.
That was a pretty good cat sound, Erin.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Yes. I picked it up from her because she just basically meows all the time. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of things disturbing you in your sleep, so this was kind of a little bit weirded me out this morning. So I was sleeping, and I always sleep with a little like eye mask on because my eyes are really big and they don't stay shut at night. Anyways, okay, that's not the whole story. That's not the point. So I had my eye mask on, and then I kind of woke up in the morning and I looked, and my little lamp beside my bed, I was like, oh, my lamp is on. I thought I turned it off, and I usually leave it on. Anyways, and I was like, whatever, and I just readjusted my eye mask, went back to sleep. And then when I woke up and I alarmed went in the morning, my light wasn't on. So I guess I dreamt that segment where the light was on, which was weird. Anyways, so that's fine. But then like later in the morning, I was just like on my computer doing some stuff just kind of before I got up. And then like half an hour into my computer stuff, there like I don't know what it was like a pen or something like fell off my desk seemingly without anything. So I've gotten this morning, I'm just like what's happening?
What is it? Not the Twilight Zone. What is it? Is it the Twilight Zone or like what?
I was just randomly humming something. Oh yeah.
Yeah,
that's it.
Anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's interesting. So I kind of thought that my room was haunted also the other day because I looked over at my computer screen and there was like a Word document open, and it was just my computer randomly typing the letter N over and over and over. And I was like, ooh, what's happening? Because it's
was the N
computer. No, and I looked. That's the thing is, I looked at the computer and I'm like, there's no nothing is on top of it. But then I realized that the external keyboard that I used to write. I pushed my chair in was like jammed on top of the N key, and that was. But for a minute there, I was like, poltergeist.
Oh, my brother played a trick on me like that once because I had I had my wireless mouse on like a table and I had moved to a seat on the couch and I was working on my computer and he caught hold of my wireless mouse and I was scrolling and then my computer was just going insane and I was like, oh my gosh, it's broken. Like I have no money, all my stuff's on here. Fully freaked out and he was just watching it. This lasted for it lasted like a minute. I was like, stop it. Why is it working? And he held it together for so long and then he burst out laughing and I was still like, why are you laughing? This is really serious. Then he held up my mouse and I was like, you jerk.
Yeah.
I hate you.
Oh, that's funny.
That's so funny.
That actually reminds me, if anybody is looking for, another podcast to listen to in addition to our amazing podcast, there is one called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. And it's fascinating. I mean, Jimmy Akin is great anyways, right? Like he's, great Catholic apologist and whatever. But in this one, he actually looks at like all kinds of different stuff, like Roswell and aliens and like time travel and what was the one? Oh, that's why I was thinking about it, because he has a whole episode on ghosts. Like, are ghosts real? So like, yes, actually, from the Catholic perspective, ghosts are a real thing, but
Right.
he'll like go through all the information, so like the pros and cons, what the science tells us, what faith tells us, and yeah,
That's really cool,
it's
actually.
great. Yeah,
I should listen to
Yeah.
that. You know, I don't really necessarily think there's a ghost here. It's probably just, you know, dreamt about the light and then I don't know about the thing that
knock
fell
the
from
pen
desk.
off. That's it,
But
yeah.
also, I might just go grab some holy water. So I'm not really sure what you do for ghosts, but you know,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well,
That's
Jimmy
great.
Aiken can hook you up. You know,
All
I
right,
can't
sounds
remember
good.
what
Yeah,
he
I'll go
said.
give it a listen. Use a 10-step
That's right.
process for, yeah, I don't know.
That's right. That's right.
Anyways, well, I didn't really know we were going to talk about ghosts today here. That wasn't like on the agenda, but hey, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is our season finale for season 1 of In the Thicket. Which is crazy, actually. It's
crazy?
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about cats and ghosts. We have no sense of decorum, you guys.
No, not at all. I love it so much.
Yeah,
though.
it is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
good.
good.
You just never know where it's gonna go. That's
That's the part of the adventure, right?
That's right.
good.
That yeah,
Well,
exactly.
we've got, yeah. I mean, so for those, maybe if this is, you know, your first time listening, I don't know if you listened to the season finale first, but yeah, I'm Nicole. I'm in Toronto here, and then I'm with Erin. Well, let's just real quick do a
Hello.
little intro. Yeah.
I'm Erin. I'm in Ottawa currently.
And I'm Rachel, and currently I'm in Oakville, but I have been in Hamilton for most of this season, recording a lot in Hamilton, but right now in Oakville. And
So
we're all in lockdown, stay home.
Yeah, stay-at-home order. Yay. I saw a meme the other day and it was like, a son says to his father in New York, oh, like, or the father says to his son, it's like, you know, in 2020, that was the year where everything locked down and you had to stay at home and then his son is like, oh man, like, what was it like? And the father says, well, I don't, you can just go to Toronto. They're still in lockdown, you know?
Oh no.
Anyway,
Oh,
Say
my
that.
goodness,
People
I know.
everywhere will be crying. It's painful. For anyone not here, it sucks.
It's
Yeah.
tough, yeah. But
Yeah.
you know what? There are other things in life. Well, anyways, this podcast is about suffering, so it's great, you know?
That's right. Exactly.
We started where we ended in lockdown.
That's right.
Right.
But yeah, so for our final episode today, we wanted to just share how we've been impacted by our podcast, I guess. Because, you know, we were talking about this and it's like we've all had this year's been a journey for each of us, you know, on this podcast. And then having these conversations together and with our guests has brought us each, I think, a lot of grace and a lot of yeah, just kind of insight into things that are going on. And so we thought we just wanted to reflect on that in our own journey this year. So I don't know, Erin, do you want to start us off with sharing about your journey this year?
Man, you're right. It has been a heck of a year for sure. Like from the time that we kind of had the initial discussions about this podcast and decided to do it, I had to leave my job because of fibromyalgia. So if you're a new listener, I was diagnosed a few years ago with fibromyalgia and it's progressively gotten worse in the last few years. So I wasn't able to continue kind of working in my job as a campus minister at the Newman Center in Toronto. So I had to leave that job. And then with that, I also needed to kind of move home with my family. So I'm actually staying at my parents' house now. So I'm like that stereotypical, like 40-year-old who moves back home with their parents when all their plans go bust and then has to figure out what they're doing with the rest of their lives. But I'm actually really grateful to be here because we love each other and yeah, enjoy each other's company. So that's actually a blessing. But yeah, so that was a big change. And then trying to figure out like how to write this master's thesis that I've been writing for trying to write for a bunch of years. And with the like cognitive challenges of fibro, it was super, super difficult, but I just recently finished it and like all the edits and everything, it is passed in, it is done, which is, amazing. Yeah. So in all of that change, I think the thing for me that like all of that stuff really kind of came together because one of the things, so the thesis is on the theology of the suffering body. So basically looking at Salvifici Doloris, which is John Paul II's letter on the human meaning of Christian suffering. and looking at theology of the body through kind of the lens of what John Paul says about suffering. And one of the things that really strikes me in that is that we're all called to be gift, right? Like this is the fundamental meaning of who we are as incarnate beings. But that doesn't change for the suffering body. Like that the suffering body can be gift both through their participation in the redemptive sufferings of Christ and the grace that comes through that, but also because just by the very presence of the suffering body, it draws out love from other people. So it draws other people into their own meaning as like gift, through their response. And that was like through the year, I just kept coming back to that, is like hearing all of these stories from people and all of the ways that they've suffered, and like hearing them talk about how other people have responded to their suffering, or even like the graces that have come through it, or the deepening that's come through it, or so I feel like my own heart has been really opened to, like, there's this bold, claim in Salvifici Doloris, which is that the church that we're able to call suffering good, which is, I mean, crazy, right? Like that's crazy.
Yeah, that
like,
is.
Yeah.
right? Like it's huge. Actually, I'll pull up the book after and just read the quote to you because it really is beautiful. But yeah, that for me has been the major thing, I think, is like this whole journey of being able to see suffering as good, and like when it's united to Christ, and to become less afraid of it,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. It's funny when I'm listening to you talk about that, Aaron. Well, even just like the last thing is saying to be less afraid of it. Like our first kind of episode was on suffering and fear, and just as I was reflecting on my own kind of journey, I'm like, oh yeah, it has a lot to do with becoming less afraid. And Aaron, you're mentioning that as well, and I'm just like, oh, this is interesting. It's kind of coming full circle there. But like, yeah, the importance of finding, like you're saying, suffering is good. Even for me to hear that, I'm like, ooh, I don't like that,
right?
And yet I'm like, okay, I need to hear this quote because
I know. I got it.
Okay, you want to read it for us, Erin?
Yep. It is precisely the church which ceaselessly draws on the infinite resources of the redemption, introducing it into the life of humanity, which is the dimension in which the redemptive suffering of Christ can be constantly completed by the suffering of man. So basically saying there that because Christ suffered and he raised human suffering to the level of redemption, like we can always find a union with Christ in that. This also highlights the divine and human nature of the church. Suffering seems in some way to share the characteristics of this nature. So suffering has a divine dimension and a human dimension. And for this reason, suffering also has a special value in the eyes of the church. It is something good before which the church bows down in reverence with all the depth of her faith in the redemption.
Wow.
Right?
Wow, that's beautiful. I feel like we're gonna have to unpack that like next year.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Exactly.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It really is interesting about that. The pointing out that we're like growing less afraid of suffering, and that was actually our first episode. I totally forgot that.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're reading that, actually, I realized that so thinking back about our episode about, why we're doing this and whatever, and why this idea came to my mind and those kinds of things. And I was like, for me, a lot of it was experiencing like isolation and suffering, and realizing that people voicing the truth about their suffering without kind of sugarcoating it, or only addressing it after it's been resolved, that there's kind of a freedom in that. And maybe that is kind of connected to this not being afraid. If someone else is not afraid to say, yeah, this is really hard and I'm in pain right now, but it's not destroying me because the Lord is here with me, but it still hurts and it's still hard. Like that gives me comfort and encourages me and gives me the strength to own that reality in my own life and also feel less alone in it, And I think that was a huge like motivation for me to want to have these kinds of conversations and open up this space where we could maybe hopefully do that for some of you guys who are listening. But as you were reading that, Erin, I realized for me, there's still a problem. There's a problem I've been trying to work out all year. And that problem is how why is it that, so part of me can sort of like accept that suffering is good. There's some part of me that's like, okay, yeah, sure. Because I think I kind of connect that to heaven, and I'm like, well, suffering is good because it purifies me and helps me become closer to Jesus and more like him, and 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 in communion with him, and then I'll be with him forever. And that's all fantastic. And I want all of that. But there's another part of me that I know is not of the Lord, which says, well, suffering is good. And so my life is just going to suck. It's
Right.
going to be basically suffering. And I don't actually want it to be suffering, but it is, and it's good. So I should just like suck it up
Yeah.
and I think I've been trying to figure out why that is wrong and why and how I can avoid it. And I
Right.
think one of the things actually, as you were reading that I realized, I mean, that's a whole, I'm still on that journey, but one of the things that I realized is I feel the pain of my suffering as something I want to reject, and also hopelessness in it, because I'm really, really focused on myself. Like I have expectations that are not really about loving the Lord or loving others. They're really about, and they're not even really about me receiving the love of God. They're really just about me getting what I want.
Yeah,
Mm.
totally. Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
bad thing. Like I think we all have that. But I think the Lord is almost like calling me to let go of that a little bit, not because in order that I can hope. Like if I can let go of needing to control my life, then I can actually hope in the joy that God wants to give me as what I actually need. But it's very difficult for me to trust that the
Yeah.
joy that God wants to give me is what I actually need.
Yeah.
And I really am like clamped down on like, I think that what I want and what I think I need is what will bring me joy. And I'm deathly afraid, and at the same time, completely accepting the fact that I'm probably not going to get any of it. And so I'm not going to ask for it. And what the Lord wants and what the Lord is going to give me is not actually going to give me joy. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm explaining myself, but
Yeah, like I think it resonates because there's been things in my life too lately that I'm like, oh, I really desire this thing in my life, and it's a good thing, and it's a thing that's good to desire, but I'm afraid I might not get it, and I can see different factors in my life. I'm like, this might not just happen in my life,
Mm.
and there's such pain there, and yet I feel the call of the Lord to surrender that, and I just don't want to, you know? So I think that there's that part of it, but I think there's also a part, Rachel, of like, and maybe I don't think you're not saying this, but of like also being in touch with our genuine desires because the Lord put those there, and being like walking into the vulnerability of hope to ask the
yes.
Lord for those things. And that is hard too. And so I think
Mhm.
it's like a thing of holding those two things in tension of like, Lord, this is what I desire. If it's your will, give this to me, but then giving it back, and not my will, but yours be done. Right. But I think that what you're describing, it's that temptation to say, well, then it's not worth hoping for anything because I'm not going to get it all.
Mm.
And my life is going to suck and that's it. Right. But it's this thing of, no, I'm still going to hope, but also be willing to give it all up.
It's
I don't
very
know.
hard. Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of that resonates with me too, because I feel like this year has been a little bit of a struggle with letting myself hope or letting myself trust in the good things that God gives, because it
Yeah.
feels like to me on so many occasions he's given something good and then taken it away.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a, like whether it's health or whether it's whatever, or so it's like and also because I'm believing more in the goodness of suffering in exactly the sense that you see, then there's like a part of me that's like, well, then I mean, if this is good, then it should just be always like, or like, but that it's hard to I find it hard to trust sometimes in the goodness of God, like when he's just offering something as sheer gift, that
Yeah.
there's like, it's hard to trust that there's no ulterior motive, because sometimes the
Right.
experience with other human beings is there is an ulterior, there's like
Totally.
something attached to a good's given sometimes, so there's like that aspect of it, but then also just, yeah, like also just that it's not always that God wants my peace to come from suffering.
Yeah.
Like, especially when you
Right.
come to a place where you're experiencing some measure of peace and suffering, you know?
You know,
Yeah.
part of me has been so recording this podcast, I think, has obviously made us all think and reflect on our own suffering and what it means to suffer
Yeah.
more regularly, right? Like, so and that's been such a grace to actually be intentional and aware and just observant of how I'm responding to different situations in my life and what that says about my relationship with the Lord and my relationship with others, and even how I love myself, like all these kinds of things. And I think looking at the fruit of my disposition is what has alerted me to the fact that there is something disconnected in me here. Because you're not wrong, Aaron, when you say, like, okay, if suffering is good, like there are saints who have not in an unhealthy way said, like, if only I could suffer like so much, right? Because if only people knew the graces that we could gather for ourselves and for others by our sufferings. And there's saints who have said that with so much joy and openness in the midst of all their pain and genuine, like, holy desire in a way for suffering. And that is not what I feel, like I realize, like, when I am like, okay, Lord, just I will suffer. I'm like that really, that person that, like, you're like, please put them out of their like, they're not joyful suffering people. They're like victim, just like in my own victim kind of shell of being like, well, I guess this is it, and I'm gonna be fine with it, Lord, fine. And it's just, that's not the fruit of a heart that is surrendered to the goodness, let's say, of suffering.
I think it's so true.
And but then it makes me think, like, what you said, Nicole, is also true. Like, the Lord, I think essentially the deeper reality here is trust. The only way in which you can be open to the goodness of suffering and the goodness of hope in things outside of just suffering is to actually trust. And that, I think, has been and is maybe the mission of our lives and our relationship with God for our whole Christian walk, because it's so layered. Like, you think you've come to trust the Lord, and then you realize, oh, I'm holding on to all of this stuff. And even for me, in the letting go of all of that stuff, it's not a letting go in trust. It's a letting go in despair. Like, I'm like, fine, I guess this is what life is supposed to be about, so take it. Which is not trust, right? So it's just been so illuminating.
Oh man, this is good. I feel like this is, we were talking about this episode and thinking, like, it's going to be like endings and beginnings, and I feel like that's exactly what we're doing, because we're uncovering all of these things that we're like, what is this? This doesn't make sense. So it'll be, it'll be great. This is stay tuned, everyone.
That's right, exactly, for the future. Yeah.
I just had one thought about when we think about suffering is good, and I'm like, okay, I have to, like, for me, I need to concretize that somehow. And so I'm like, okay, having a baby is good. But, like, if you say having a baby is good and you talk about that, that's like labor. It's a lot of pain, and it's, even the whole pregnancy process, morning sickness. It seems like every woman that I know right now is having a baby. It's like baby season or something. So I'm like really attuned to this right now, and many of my friends but it's like, it's good. It's good because there's this new life, and I'm thinking, like, maybe that is the way in which the church says suffering is good, is that because suffering is the birth of new life of some sort in our lives, of something new that God is doing. But that there's pain in that too, but that it's good.
And it's just a way, like, it makes me think about, like, when you said trust, Rachel, there was this talk I gave for a thing where was using kind of like a meditation on Peter walking in the water, and it's like, in some senses, I can't remember if I've mentioned this on the podcast before or not, but anyways, in some sense, Peter, like, Jesus is asking Peter, who is a fisherman, who knows water, how it acts, how it responds to the elements, everything about it. He knows everything about water. And Jesus is asking him to forget everything he knows about water when he invites him to get out of the boat onto the thing, And so, like, and so sometimes it's like a forgetting what we know. And I think so much of suffering is about that, really, of, like, because it is, like, even Salve Dolorous says that it is a contact with evil. Like, every suffering is in some sense a touching of evil, So how then can that be good, So, but
Right.
it's exactly like that, like allowing the Lord's suffering heart that knows exactly the depth and truth of suffering to then somehow speak to us in a way where we're forgetting everything we know about suffering and pain and goodness and, to like learn it from him.
Yeah.
That last bit I think is so key, because when Jesus asked Peter to forget what he knows, um it's in order to look at him. It only works, and it literally only works when Peter's gaze is fixed on the Lord. As soon as his gaze moves, what he knows about water is the truth again.
All comes flooding back.
That's
Right?
right.
Exactly. So it's like there is only one way.
Literally.
Yeah, there's through, and that's in the Lord. Like without him, it's not possible in a sense.
Right.
But with him, crazy things are possible,
Right.
And that's the other thing. I mean, I was speaking with my sister last night about, we were just sharing, and we one of our episodes, so this is maybe endings and beginnings, going through some of our guests maybe, but we had an episode with her called Life's U-Turns. And we were chatting last night, and we were talking about the invitation to greatness that is present in suffering. That like, okay, what is our, the whole thing that Pope Benedict says about we settle for mediocrity when we're called to greatness, but the call to greatness, it doesn't look like Instagram worthy. Like it is really, it doesn't look great as it's happening. It looks great at the end, which is why a lot of people tell their stories about suffering at the end, because they've come through it and they have all this stuff that's happened that they can share with us. But when you're in it, it doesn't look like that. And I think if we are able to recognize that there's an invitation here that hasn't fully been realized yet, but that is happening right now in and through the suffering. And that's what the cross is, right? Like the cross is the path to the resurrection, which you could never anticipate in looking at the cross. Like if you look at the cross, it's the definitive anti-life,
Right.
and it is literally the instrument of eternal life. So I think it is like that. When we walk through that suffering, there is a real invitation to something incredible and great.
Yeah.
And it's also something that looks nothing, and it yet happens through this moment of pain that we're living,
Totally. Yeah. I mean, when I think about my year and sort of in lived with this podcast too, but a lot of the stuff that I've been going through is sort of discerning things where I'm called in my life that don't make sense to my rational brain. And that's been so challenging to trust, like, Lord, are you really asking me to do this? This doesn't make sense. And yet this is the only option where there's peace. Option A doesn't seem peaceful. Option B doesn't seem peaceful. So I'm like, option 8.5, which is like, is that a thing, Lord? Like, why are you, and they're being just so, but being called into this place, it's sort of vague. Sorry for not giving more details, but just like in discerning God's call for my life. And then hearing all the different stories of folks. But a lot of it came back to exactly what we're talking about, is just this trust. Be like, okay, Lord, like I'm just going all in with you here. I'm going to trust that this is where you're leading me, because if I don't, then I have nothing. Then it's just despair. So I'm going, and there's different things in my life now that it's like, okay, once I've chosen to trust the Lord, okay, Lord, you're calling me to this. Okay, I'll stay here. But it's like, great, let's add another layer onto that. Now I'm like, okay, there's no going back anymore. Like I really have to trust that this is where the Lord's leading me. And it feels like a tremendous risk. So it's like he's calling me to these deeper levels of trust where I'm like, man, if it goes wrong, I can't even go there. It's like I can't even go there anymore, But I'm like, oh yeah, that's such a beautiful, in a sense, it's a good place to be. I feel like I really do feel like in a sense I'm like all in, and there's ways that the Lord's calling me to be, I think, more all in. There's many levels to that trust, but yeah, it's just like this call to trust even while I'm afraid and while while it's painful and while it's
Yeah.
confusing, you
It
know?
reminds me of when we had Christine on, and when she said, like, she says that, God doesn't give us more than we can handle. Like, no, he does give us more than we can handle,
Yeah,
because
that's
he
right.
wants us to be reliant
Yeah.
on him. But even in trust, like, I was listening to this talk, or this debate that Bishop Barron was having with an atheist the other day.
Mm.
And he was talking about faith, and that faith is something that is supra rational. And I think, like, trust is like that too, like there's an
Totally.
element of rationality that happens to it, because we are called to use our reason and our intellect to know things about the Lord and the world around us, and to grow in virtue and all those things, right? But it's like, at some point, there is a step that is out into thin air, and it's not irrational, it's supra rational,
Yeah.
because it requires grace, and
Yeah.
God is giving that.
Totally. Yeah.
You know?
For anyone who's like, we're saying supra rational, which is like, I feel like it's hard to hear on our audio
Oh,
if
yeah,
you're
maybe,
listening to
yeah.
audio.
Yeah, not super rational.
Not super rational or super irrational, but
Right.
supra
Rational,
Supra
which is
rational.
like rational, ultra rational, or like,
Rational plus. It's like Disney Plus, not just
Yeah.
Disney. It's Disney Plus. It's not just rational, it's rational
That's good.
plus.
Yeah, that's right.
That
That's what
is
we
good.
just call it now. That's an in the thicket
Mhm.
term.
Then we
Yeah,
should
Plus.
trademark
exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
That is great.
no, that is such a good point. And I think, in a way, it's sort of, I go through these dichotomies of where, we always have those experiences of consolation where you kind of do get it. So even though I've said all these things where it's like, it's been a struggle for me all this year, there's been those moments where I kind of did get it. And all of those moments are like the sense that there is something so much better that I'm a part of, that God is making me a part of. And it almost makes me excited. Like, even though
Yeah.
I'm suffering, I'm like, oh my gosh, like and it's not, what's that word? It's not morbid or it's not kind of hyper focused on pain or anything like that, but it's just like, it's kind of like that experience when you finally are able to love someone that you find really annoying, or you love someone that is a jerk, like, when someone's a jerk to you and you're genuinely able to just say, hey, I'm okay, like, I actually love you. There's a kind of freedom, right? Like, you kind of feel like something opens up for you that just didn't exist
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And I feel like that is the thing that the Lord is inviting us to, but it only happens if we genuinely enter in.
Right.
But that also, for the super rational thing, made me realize we did talk briefly about healing, I think, in some of our episodes. And I got to go to the Holy Land last year in January before all the Corona stuff happened, right before, actually. And yeah, I got to hear a speaker talk about healing, and we had some healing services in Bethlehem in the Holy Land, which is so amazing. And I realized, yeah, we don't have that open-handed humility to ask the Lord for resolution of our suffering. And part of that journey is to have that open-handed humility and full sort of like childlike freedom in that ask,
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
and there's joy in that, and there's like freedom in that. And I just feel God just calling us into that space even while we are experiencing our crosses.
Yeah. Totally. It's not, if you're in the middle of something that's really tough right now, like, this is something that it's like that it is a true thing to say, it will not always be like this. We don't know when it's going to change, but it will not always be like this. We are promised hope, and we are promised hope not just in heaven, but also new life and resurrection on this earth. Like, that is just a true thing.
And I feel like it's such a good thing to name that, because that's even been like my own experience of suffering. Like, I'm sure, like, your guys' experience of suffering too. Like, capacity for suffering, or the way that I look at suffering or enter into it or see God in it or whatever, is greater now than it was
Yeah.
before. And
Yeah.
that process came about through actually suffering,
Right.
like
Yep.
but there is a greater hope in it. There is a greater, there's still suffering. There's still like, I still a long way to go from being able to, put out a saint quote that's like, Lord, more suffering, please. Like not there yet, but like on the way,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's been so lovely, all of our guests that we've had on this podcast. Thank you to you and listeners who've, engaged with us and shared their own stories and things. Like it's a huge blessing to be able to have this conversation and have it go beyond just the three of us, but, with guests and with our listeners. So, thank you for that too. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this, of our journey, in some way.
Amen.
Yeah, it feels almost surreal, I think, to have to be here. It actually does really just feel surreal to me because I think, that there is anyone listening to these conversations is kind of crazy. Like it just blows my mind. So thank you. Because I'm here, I'm wearing pajama pants. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I'm in my parents' house right now. Like and we're having these conversations that I know for me are very bless me and are very fruitful. But it's so cool to know that other people are tuning in and hopefully, honestly, having these kinds of conversations in their own circle of communities of faith. Like I think that was all of our hope, is that we would just encourage kind of honest, real conversations between people, that we'd be less afraid to share our journeys with each other in our own communities of faith, and with our friends and family and stuff. So thank you to everybody for listening. It's just so cool. And we really do pray for you guys, and are just so grateful. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Amen.
That's great.
I'm not even gonna add anything new to that. I'm just gonna say amen to
Yeah.
No,
it's good. Well, to wind up today, I know we usually end with God winks. So you can share, Erin and Rachel, let's either share, you can share God wink, but a forward looking one if you can. So sort of when that is, or something related to maybe what we're up to this summer, or new plans that we've, that kind of thing.
Cool.
I know I'm putting us on the spot a little bit there, but
no, it's good. It's good. I can share first. Yeah,
go for it, Erin.
You have a minute to. So mine is, I kind of came to this moment over Easter, like in between being done thesis stuff and then having a moment of like panic and existential crisis, when I was like, there's a void in my life. There's nothing. Like, I'm not working. I'm like, but then kind of this idea, like for a while I've been thinking about writing a book, and I was like, okay, Lord, maybe now is the time for it. And then I talked to my spiritual director and I prayed about it a bit, and it just is sitting like with so much peace. So that's kind of where I'm headed. I'm gonna write a book, funny enough, on suffering. And
surprise.
Yeah, that's right. Surprise. Yeah, so if you're hearing this right now, please pray for me. And I really feel like it's where the Lord is leading me right now. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that.
Well, Erin's been sharing with us a little bit of what she's envisioning for this book, and I am so excited to read it. I think it's going to be a wonderful, like, just resource and things.
Thank you.
Stay tuned, everybody.
That means a lot, because it really feels like, I feel a little bit when I say that, like I'm going to write a book, it feels like it's the equivalent of saying, I am amazing and you should listen to me because I know everything, which is not.
But you are amazing.
You are amazing.
Oh man,
I don't know if you said this, like, because your thesis too, Erin, like you've just written and researched on like the theology of the suffering body, right? And connecting those things. And then, as you've shared, you're living a lot of this kind of stuff in your everyday life. So I'm just like, oh man, this is going to be good. It's going to be good.
Praise God. Please, Lord, like I feels like he's in it. So then it's super rational trust.
Yeah.
It's like
totally
living that a little bit. Yeah. How about you, Rachel? What do you think? What are your plans?
Yeah, there's lots of stuff happening in, like, with my family. Like there's a few weddings gonna happen, and please everybody pray for people getting married right now, because it is so insane.
Yeah.
It's like from one day to the next, you're like, well, we can have 50 people, we can have 2 people, we can have 10 people. Like you just literally, it's so hard for everybody. So if you're getting married or you're engaged out there and you're in this kind of situation, know that you're not alone, and we're praying for you. So there's a few weddings coming up in my family. So that'll be busy. And I'm going to be finishing up my, my program probably by December, but I'm going to be doing more work on it in the summer than I had originally planned, which I'm actually really excited about. And I think for me, I'm really aware that God is creating some space in my life right now to kind of reflect on this hope thing that I struggle with, and looking at, just actually God has created a lot of space in the last few months. And I think it's going to continue for me to just really do a lot of introspective work, which by the way, I don't know if I sound introspective on this podcast. I have no idea how I sound, but I am not I like to avoid things. That is my MO. I know I watch so much television, y'all. Talk to me about any TV show. I've probably seen it because I love pop culture and TV and dog and cat videos, and just keep me going. I could do all of it. So I'm avoider number one. And so for me, it's actually a really big deal to be like, I am going to purposely introspect on things and blah, blah, blah. So that's what's happening with me.
That's good.
That's
Maybe
cool.
there'll be like a halo on top of your head when we come back in September.
I'll make one.
That's right.
On a cardboard.
I
deserve it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. How about you, Nicole?
Yeah, well, I'm moving to the US in the summer. I got a job down there. Yeah. So that's part of the part of the leap of trust that the Lord is calling me to, but I'll be working down there. And so so there's a lot happening right now, just continuing to work on school while preparing for this move and figuring out how that's all going to work. So I'll be, I'll still be on the podcast, but I'll be zooming in from a different location, different country next year. So,
and just for those who are listening, it's not like, moving down. It's like Nicole is going to be working in her field and helping other people in neurologic music therapy to learn.
Deal.
It's huge. It's such a beautiful opportunity. And also, I mean, we will be very sad to not have you in the general Ontario area to visit, but we have already decided that we are coming down for a road trip once the border allows.
There you go.
So this is terrible, but I've just gotten used to this Zoom being the way I socialize.
Yeah. I know.
I'll still see you because there's still Zoom.
I know. That's also the thought that I've had too. I'm like, well, we never see each other in person anyway. So what's the big difference? I could be anywhere,
That's okay. We are going to do a road trip. We'll do an In the Thicket tour, and then we'll come to various states. And so if you live in the States or other places
talk to you about suffering.
That's right. Exactly. We'll just come and bring suffering into your life.
Everyone's going to be dying to get in there. Yeah.
We'll come and just egg your houses on the way.
Suffering tour heading to your city now.
We're getting out of hand.
Line up. Yeah.
Okay, ladies. Now let's
what I was going to say in our endings and beginnings? I was going to say that when we first started, I was super excited about our Raptors team and the iteration of the team we had, and a whole NBA playoff season happened. And then now our team is a totally different team. We just lost a player, Norman Powell, who I really loved. And so anyways, there's lots of changes that have happened over this year. Lots of suffering.
Right. Yeah.
It wouldn't be In the Thicket without a Raptors update.
So it really wouldn't. Yeah. So I had to throw
and weather. We haven't talked about that yet, but we'll save that for next season.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
good.
Amazing.
Well, thanks everyone for a wonderful season. To our listeners, we really love you, and we're so thankful for you walking this journey along with us, and we're praying for you, and we're excited to see you again in September.
Amen.
Yeah.
We will still be on Instagram every now and then. So if you don't follow us, please follow us. It's at In the Thicket Podcast on Instagram. And and we'll definitely be updating. Maybe Nicole, you can give us an Insta update when you move down south.
Oh yeah.
Totally. Show us your new
Yeah.
digs.
Yeah.
So we'll be in touch that way, but we're really looking forward to a whole new season 2. What the heck?
Yeah. And we have so many ideas that we wanted to do this season but didn't have time for, so those are coming up. And over the summer going to be praying about what what we're going to be doing. So if you have ideas or things that you'd like to hear on our podcast, like, let us know,
For sure. Send them our way.
Yeah. That's great.
All
right.
Well, happy summer, everybody.
Happy summer.
We'll see you in the fall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for listening to In the Thicket. Have a good summer. See you in the fall. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.